What's up, guys? Got a surprise for you, something that I've been waiting on for 3 years. This February actually marks the third year that I have owned the Nova, which, as you can see, it has its own spot on the driveway now. It's off the street, but got a surprise. This is it. This right here is an LS. Now I know what you're thinking, that is an ugly looking engine. It is very dirty and it is very trucky. This is a 6-liter LQ4 code LS engine. People will say the iron block engines aren't LSs, but they are. And this is a real 6.0 liter. It's out of a 2006 Chevy van. So you can see it has the extended Chevy dipsticks, which are ridiculously long. Like, that thing is like 5 feet long, and so not going to be using that, obviously, but you can see how some of the stuff on here is intended for van use. The oil filler cap is also extended. It's just very not performance oriented, but the 6-liter block is a great block to use. It uses the bigger 4-inch bore spacing for the heads. These are the stock 317 heads for all you LS nuts out there that know all the cam and head codes and all that fun stuff. And yeah, it's got a 4L80E transmission behind it that came with it, but I'm not going to be using this. This is going to get sold off along with pretty much everything else. The only thing that I'm going to be keeping off this engine is literally the block, bottom end, heads, valve covers, coils, and maybe like, I don't know, 20 to 50% of the stuff on the front of the engine, not the fan. Gonna figure out the power steering and AC, alternator. Not gonna be using the AC. Water pump may stay. It all really depends. I have to figure out some of the accessory options that I have available to me. But other than that, I'm gonna be using the coil packs, valve covers. That's it. The truck intake is going, the ECU is going, because yes, this is gonna be carbureted. I have a new carburetor on the Nova. I won't pop the hood right now because it's locked, but I have a new carburetor on the Nova. Let's just say I had to get one out of necessity, but it's a great carburetor. It is actually a Holley double pumper. If you follow me on Instagram, you've seen that new carburetor already, and it should be pretty good for this LS engine. The LS engines are basically the remixed version of the original small block Chevy, which is what I have in the Nova. It's a 350 from a mid-90s truck. This is from a mid-2000s van. And so, Chevy small blocks are great because they're simple, they're super easy to work on. I've worked on both Gen 1 blocks and Gen 3, that's LS for you nerds out there, small blocks, and they're so easy to work on. They just fly apart. They're like Legos, basically. And you only need like 3 wrenches to take an LS block apart. It's great. Like 3 socket sizes, maybe a pry bar, super basic tools, nothing exotic or anything like that. They're super reliable. They're in everything too. Like I said, they're in trucks, they're in vans, they're in cars, they're just everywhere. They're awesome. But first step for this engine is going to be basically getting the transmission off the back of it. I've got an engine stand that I got to put together, and we're going to start there. Alright, so got my fancy new Harbor Freight engine stand all ready to go. This is the 1,000-pound, stand that they have. I like the higher weight one because it does have the 2 front wheels, and I've seen people have problems with engines tipping on the single front wheel ones. Those are a little sketchy, even if they are big sometimes. It's just, I like having the 4 wheels personally, and it makes it a little bit easier to get around too, sometimes having 2 wheels in the front swiveling instead of just the one. If you get caught on something, it gives you a bit more to work with. So now I'm going to start getting this ready to get the transmission off and get the engine on the stand. Alright, now before I can really take the bell housing bolts out, because the way this is sitting, basically balancing on both the engine and the transmission on the tire here, I have to basically hold it up with the engine hoist here and slide it forward so that the transmission will sit on the tire and the engine will be off to the side here, supported by the crane, engine hoist, whatever you want to call it. And then I could take the bell housing bolts off, and then the transmission won't just fall off or fall into the tire, or start binding up, bending bolts. That's never fun, and the engine won't just tip off the side here as well. So I'm gonna finagle this a little bit. Hopefully no fluids come flying out at me, and we can start getting this done. All right, so as you can see, that's a bit of a mess. It was a little bit of a wrestle there. Got dark really quick out here, but got the engine off the trans, and gonna get the flywheel and converter off in just a second here after we clean up a little bit, and then hopefully get this thing onto the stand. Looking pretty good. All right, I kind of lied. I didn't clean up first, but I did get the flex plate and the converter off. And the transmission is free. There's ATF everywhere. Not as bad as the Mustang, if you remember that. That spilled basically like 3 full quarts of ATF. This is less than a quart probably. It's not too bad. But everything's looking good, and yes, it is a real 6-liter. A lot of people try to sell, 6 liters, but they're actually 5.3s or 4.8s, even though it says on the blocks. It's kind of easy to tell. But I'm going to show you a trick, like in this case, when it's hard to get the engine. You see how high of an angle it's sitting at right now, up mated to the engine stand where it is. Basically, you can just take the engine, I don't remember the specific name, the cradle, whatever you want to call this, the plate. Take it off of the actual engine stand and then bolt it to the back of the engine. It makes it a heck of a lot easier. I'll show you. When you mount this plate, you want to get this as close to the center of gravity of the engine as possible. And on a V8 like this, it's going to be closer to where the cam actually mounts, which is right in the middle of the top of the V part, kind of close to the heads here. If you see like the upper bell housing bolt, just below that. Now this particular plate, the way it's shaped and the size it is and everything, it doesn't get that close, but it does at least get above the crank, which should help much better than if it were down here. Otherwise, when you have it on the engine stand, the whole thing could just kind of and want to flip upside down. So that should be all right for now, and once I get some of the other stuff off the engine, it'll help as well. Alright, and well, that's pretty much all I had planned for tonight. Got the engine on the stand, looking pretty good, decently stable. Gonna spend the next few weeks here tearing it down, not all the way down. I'm probably gonna leave the long block together. Always cars. And then basically start stripping everything off of it, the accessories, the intake, all the EFI stuff, the harness, the ECU. I might have somebody interested in the transmission already. We'll see. Hopefully get that moved along. Basically, sell everything extra off of this to fund the rest of the build. And the Nova is basically, I'll just say this right now. These engines, bone stock with just a carburetor conversion, long tube headers, and just tuned optimally, have been known to make over 400 crank horsepower if you do it right. So we're going to go from about 260 to 400. That's almost 150 horsepower increase. Basically, it's like strapping a big shot of NOS or maybe a supercharger or something onto the car. So this should be a lot of fun, and I cannot wait. But that's all we got for tonight, and see you next time.